And when we file bankruptcy for people, it can happen, but if it's going to happen, it's something that we know ahead of time. And in your case, you had assets. And in addition to you and Colleen's desire to file bankruptcy, Chapter 13, to pay back some of your debts, we also use Chapter 13 to protect your assets because you had some equity in your home. You owned the vacant land free and clear, and you owned some cars and you had some other assets. But we used a strategy of using the Chapter 13 in coordination with your desire to pay back your debts to make sure you accomplished your goals, which was protect your assets, get a fresh start, and start rebuilding.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was, literally, we ended up paying off $96,000 during the Chapter 13.
And kudos to you because you had a significant monthly payment, and you used the Chapter 13 as a tool to help reach your goals. Good morning, this is attorney Jamie Miller, and welcome to another edition of the Miller Law Chronicles podcast. Today we're going to talk about our client, Robert Warren, who's been nice enough to join us today to talk about his bankruptcy experience. We're going to talk about what led to him filing bankruptcy back in 2017, as well as his path and journey during the bankruptcy. And then we're going to talk about how his credit has improved after the filing when his case was completed in 2022. Hey, Robert, how are you? Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Good morning. I'm fine. Thank you.
As we talked earlier, I just want to make sure that you're kind of comfortable talking about this personal information. And I know that you're motivated to have this conversation because you want to make sure that others who may be in a similar situation feel comfortable with, dealing with their finances and dealing with the bankruptcy process and that stuff. So thank you so much for putting yourself out there and having this conversation. It's very important.
No problem at all.
So you live in Wisconsin. Have you been a Wisconsinite your entire life?
Actually moved to Wisconsin when I was in the 5th grade, so pretty much all my life.
Okay. And you currently live in the Hartford area. Have you been there for a while?
25 years.
All right. All right. Packers fan, Bucks fan, any of that?
Yes and yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, I don't know if you had a chance to watch the Bucks game last night, but that was a little disheartening. So game 3 in Milwaukee on Friday night, we'll see if they can do any better.
Yeah, need to come back.
They need to come back. They need to play like a team and get organized. But that's a conversation for another day. So I understand you're married to Colleen.
Yes.
And you have one child. How old is your child at this time?
He will be 20 next week.
Okay. So at the time we filed a bankruptcy for you in 2017, he would have been a minor.
Yes.
And you had your wife, so you were a family of 3 at that time.
Yes.
And tell me, what do you do for a living now?
I am in home improvement sales.
Okay.
I've been with the same company for 33 years. We do siding, we do windows, fascia soffit, gutters, tubs and showers.
Perfect. Thank you for letting us know that. And that's the same industry that you were in when we filed your case in 2017.
Yes.
When we filed your case way back then, you were having issues with credit card debt, and that's what led you to make the call to our office seeking help. If you can kind of flash back to that time when you first reached out, tell me a little bit about what was going on and what led you to make that call.
So we had medical debt. My wife had some issues that she had to get taken care of, and then credit card debt. And honestly, it was overspending also, bad decisions, here and there, and basically robbing Peter to pay Paul. We would be try to get caught up, and we'd end up going to like another financial institution to get like a high interest loan to pay off other stuff, and it snowballed from there. And the thing about it is if you're living paycheck to paycheck and you can only make your minimum payments, you'll never pay high interest loans or credit cards off. It just takes years and years and years.
Right. And tell us a little bit about what led to the accumulation of the credit card debt? Was there something that happened in your life, or loss of a job, or an illness, or something like that, that made you start to, need to put more on your credit cards?
Well, it seemed like at that point the home improvement industry kind of dipped down a bit, and so my income wasn't what it was. And, obviously with an income that's kind of going, up and down, if you don't have your finances in check, it's not going to cover it. And so it got to the point where it was just, like I said, snowballing to the point where it was like, we can't do this anymore, worried about every paycheck. It's like, okay, we have to pay this, we have to pay this, we have to pay this. And then it's like, okay, how are we going to pay this? And it was just, wasn't a good time. I mean, and then obviously if you're late on payments, the phone ringing all the time, lenders calling. And we sat back and looked at this and we're just like, okay, we've got to do something. I mean, I'm 57 years old. My wife is 57 years old. And it's like we are closer to retirement than, and if we ever want to retire, we've got to do something about this.
And the stress from the debt collectors, do you remember if any of the collectors had sued you or filed a collection lawsuit against you or anything like that?
Right before we had filed, yes, a couple of them had gone to, we didn't end up going to court, but a couple of them had gone to court trying to collect. And so collection agencies. And so we filed, and obviously that kind of hit the head right there. As soon as we started getting notices like that, it's like, okay, we got to make a change here.
Right. And was it impacting your moods and impacting your family? And tell me a little bit about that.
100%. I mean, the stress level was through the roof. Being in sales, I'm in commission sales. So when you've got all that on your mind, to try to go out with an open mind and work, and it was like, just very, very, very stressful, trying to keep a strong face. We obviously didn't, at that point, he was 15 years old, so we didn't tell our son any of this, that was going on. And, and I think my income, suffered that way too, with all that stress on top of me. When you've got all that on your mind, it's hard to concentrate on other things, losing sleep. It wasn't every time the phone would ring, you just kind of like shiver. It's like, oh, who now?
Right. And a lot of people don't talk about that. And we deal with that a lot with our clients. One of the first questions that we ask is, how you doing? And how are you dealing with this? And how are you coping with this? Because it's really important for us to kind of get to the bottom and find out what that pain point is and what the trigger is for what made the call, so that we can help people, get back on track and get their lives back. So we were talking about, kind of the stress. And one of the things that's important to us here at Miller Miller is to ask that question, how you're doing, and what we can do to relieve that stress. And was it hard for you and Colleen to decide to make that first call?
It was. We had spoken with a family member who was, they were in some financial difficulties too, and they had mentioned that they were, talking to you guys. And so we did an initial meeting. We were originally thinking some kind of consolidation, but then after looking at everything, we did feel that chapter 13 was the best thing to do. But yeah, that first phone call it was difficult. I mean, because you're just admitting to yourself, okay, we've got an issue. We've got to get this taken care of. And it's scary.
Right. And how did you even know about bankruptcy? You said you had a friend that you were talking to
Right.
that kind of helped.
And I mean, I'd heard of, obviously, heard of it before, and then weren't sure, where to go with it. And the chapter 13 is what we chose because I've never been the type of person. I mean, we incurred the debt and I didn't want to run away from that, so it's like, okay, so let's do something. We can do this. And then with your program, what really intrigued me is not only getting you through this. I mean, as soon as we filed, it's like, okay, the phone calls stopped. That was huge, from the debt collectors. And, taking that first step, like I said, not easy, but we knew we had to do it.
Right. And yeah, so you chose to do a chapter 13, which was a repayment plan.
Yes.
And there's different reasons why to do a chapter 13 or to do a chapter 7. But you and Colleen wanted to be in a situation where you could pay back some of your debts and it just felt right for you, which is great.
Yeah.
But when you first retained our office, we reached out to your creditors, let them know that you had retained us. We sent certified letters out to them to keep them off of your back. And then we get the case filed and we request this injunction that stops the creditors from bothering you. So once you kind of engaged with our firm, those phone calls stopped and it took some of the pressure off.
Correct.
And you didn't face any, wage garnishments or anything like that
No.
because the bankruptcy and our engagement, stopped that.
Yeah, and I had mentioned before that we had with the, a couple of the collectors had filed, for taking us to court. And so we ended up not having to do that because we filed in time to be able to stop that.
Excellent. And when we filed your case, we set you up on the Chapter 13 repayment plan. And you indicated you owned your home, you had a couple cars, you even had some vacant land in Wisconsin that was family land. Did you lose any of your assets at all?
We did not.
Right. So some people have that perception that if I file bankruptcy, I'm going to lose my assets. And when we file bankruptcy for people, it can happen, but if it's going to happen, it's something that we know ahead of time. And in your case, you had assets. And in addition to you and Colleen's desire to file bankruptcy, Chapter 13, to pay back some of your debts, we also use Chapter 13 to protect your assets because you had some equity in your home. You owned the vacant land free and clear, and you owned some cars and you had some other assets. But we used a strategy of using the Chapter 13 in coordination with your desire to pay back your debts to make sure you accomplished your goals, which was protect your assets, get a fresh start, and start rebuilding.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was, I mean, literally, we ended up paying off $96,000 during
Right.
during
I
the
mean,
Chapter 13.
and kudos to you because you had a significant monthly payment
Mm-hmm.
and you used the Chapter 13 as a tool to help, reach your goals. Now, with the amount of credit card debt that you had a Chapter 13 payment that included both of your car payments.
Mm-hmm.
But was Chapter 13 monthly payment less than the amount that you were paying your regular bills, the monthly payments?
I would say yes, it was. I mean, it was up there. It was definitely up there, but it was less. And the big part of it too is the fact that it was one payment due on a specific date. So you could plan for it knowing, okay, little bit out of each paycheck, whatever it might be, to make sure we've got this payment at the end of the month. Where if you've got a ton of, 20 different payments going 20 different directions on 20 different days, very hard to keep track of.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's hard. And when you do a Chapter 13, all of those payments are consolidated into one payment.
Right.
And you make one payment and it goes to a trustee that's appointed by the court. And the trustee pays what you need to pay towards the creditors, pays your car payments. Your particular Chapter 13 plan was a 5-year plan, and it took you to June of 2022 when your case was over. Now, the path of being in a Chapter 13 isn't always easy. What were some of the challenges, if you remember, being in the Chapter 13?
So, again, being in home improvements, income went up and down, and there were some times that it became very difficult to make that payment. And that's where I give you guys all the credit because I called and you worked with us, you worked with the trustee to be able to, we fell a little off track and we were able to get back on track, with you guys working with the trustee, working with the courts, which, obviously for somebody to try to do that on their own, very complicated. It's like you really have to know what you're doing. And every step of the way, you guys were there with us. So it wasn't one of those things we filed, see you later. Every step of the way you were with us. And that's what helped get us, on track and stay on track.
Yeah, and you were very engaged in the process, which is very helpful because we can help our clients in a Chapter 13. You and Colleen had a high monthly payment, but during that 5-year period you were in that 13, there was ups and downs, and we have flexibility to modify payments and to change things. Now, were you able to get any credit at all during that 5-year period?
Yes, the credit we did get was for 2 car loans.
So when we filed your case, you had a 2006 vehicle and a 2003 vehicle. which were really old. So you needed new, different transportation, and you were able to accomplish
Yeah, and
that
they
while
because
you were in the
they both those vehicles actually died completely. So it was like we had
right.
to do something. So and then again, it was great because you guys walked us through that process because obviously to incur more debt in when you're in a chapter 13, the trustee has to approve that. And so you guys walked us every step of the way to make, to get that process done.
Yeah, and it's not always easy, but when we have a client that needs transportation, and once you're in the chapter 13, surprisingly, you're able to get the credit. The interest rates aren't always the best,
Correct.
but if you need a car loan, we can take you through the process to get that car loan approved and get the trustee to get it approved for you. So there is room within the 13 for flexibility on your payment, getting cars approved, improving your credit. So when you exited the bankruptcy in June of 2022, what was the status of your credit at that point?
I want to say we were probably in the low 500s, at that point. And then through your plan to 720, part of that is like, and it's scary because you just come out of this and you're like, oh no, I need to get another credit card. And so getting, a few credit cards, of course, crazy interest on them, but just doing, simple things is like, all you do is you put like one tank of gas on it and then you pay it off at the end of the month because then you're starting to show a pattern of on-time payments, and then important also is available credit to you, and we did that for a
Yeah,
year.
yeah, and your credit score was low when you exited the bankruptcy, but we enrolled you and you took advantage of our 7 steps to 720 credit score program.
Yes,
I applaud you for that because I can't tell you how many clients don't do the program, and that program
it
works.
does.
And what you're talking about now with kind of getting that secured credit card or getting a small unsecured credit card or making sure that your car payments report and your mortgage payments report to the credit bureau is really going to help you get back on your feet as far as your credit goes. Tell me, how is your credit score now?
798.
That's
Yeah,
amazing, and that's a real testament to you and Colleen and how you do things. And I'll often tell clients, and you're a great example of this. We can set the path towards improved credit, but we can't do it for you.
right.
It's a partner, and it all starts from before we even file your case when we pull your credit report to make sure and review what errors are on your credit report. And then after your case is done, we go back to that credit report and we make sure that any errors on the credit report are deleted. But more importantly, any of the credit report notations, like from credit card companies, if you had a Discover card for $10,000, we want to make sure that when your case is discharged, that it properly reflects on your credit report that that debt is
Mm-hmm.
discharged. Because if we don't do that, then when you go to apply for credit, that credit report, which is in error now because it's been discharged in the bankruptcy, is going to hold your credit down.
Right.
And then we also want to make sure that all judgments are satisfied. And then, most important, that our clients are participating in the 7 steps to 720 credit program, which you did and which has led to your really high 700 790
Yeah.
credit score, which is great. Tell me, what lessons did you learn from the chapter 13 that's kind of helped you and Colleen and your son manage your finances at this time?
So the main thing is like not overspending. For example, if we see something we want, be it a larger ticket item, we're going to save for that and get it, and get it that way instead of just whipping out a credit card right away and say, oh, 5,000, let's do it. Boom. And no, because we very much, it's got to be paid off every month. That's the way we looked at it. And actually, now that my son is an adult, we did tell him what we did and why we did it. So he knows. I mean, I wish at 20 years old, my parents, had walked me, through finances. But back then they didn't. My parents were older. And so it didn't happen. So we wanted to make sure he knows the importance of good credit. In fact, what we did for him is actually I put him as a co person on 2 of our credit cards to help get his credit started, and he's sitting at a 750. So it's like, just to help him out because he's going to be moving out in August. And I mean, to get an apartment and everything like that, you have to have a decent credit score. And so and like, what's really nice is it's given us a lot of financial, freedom during all this. And I mean, I couldn't really contribute to my 401k. There was no extra money to do anything. That's being built up, quite rapidly. I've been able to actually max out my contribution, every year. And and also, like large items I was talking about before, we needed a new refrigerator. We just bought it. We paid cash for it. We needed a new washer and dryer. We paid cash for it. We've been able to take a couple of really nice vacations without incurring any more debt. And also it's nice too, the stress isn't there being on vacation, not worried about money while we're on vacation. So it's been nice to be able to do that, to be able to, to get it all paid for and like that. You leave for the vacation, you got no debt on it. You just go and you have a good time. And that's really what we've been able to do. And then also we've been able to, couldn't do this before either. We've been able to build up our savings. I'm working my way up, but I've got 4 months worth of bills in the bank, working our way towards 6, and want to go higher than that, just to have that cushion in the bank. And ever since when we discharged, it was just this huge weight lifted off of me, and my work got way more productive. Income has just gone up substantially, without that stress, knowing that it's sales. I have a bad week. It's okay. It's not gonna hurt us. We're not gonna be behind a financial 8 ball again.
Yeah, that's so wonderful to hear. And it's interesting because, people don't file bankruptcy because they want to. They file bankruptcy because of the circumstances in their life, loss of a job, a divorce, an accident. What led to your bankruptcy was a drop in income. And, but to know that the event happened, that you solve the problem. I always tell people, action kills fear. You may have been trying to roll and solve this problem prior to 2017, but ultimately you took an affirmative step to relieve the stress, and you were in this payment plan for 5 years, and now you're out of it. Your credit score is almost 800, which is remarkable. You have a savings, you own your home. I'm really proud to have this conversation with you and excited for what you and Colleen have accomplished together. Thank you.
We've also been able to pay extra on our mortgage every month toward the principal, and we'll have the house paid off in 7 years. So
that's awesome. Yeah. Rob, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, of course.
I appreciate you sharing our journey, or sharing your journey with our listeners. It's really a remarkable story. I wish you and Colleen the best of luck. And for all of our listeners, if you're enjoying this podcast, please like us on all the podcast platforms or subscribe to us. You can see us in video on YouTube. Thank you again, Rob. And Rob, can you just hold on for 1 sec?
Sure.